There's a difference between optimism and hope.
I appreciate the nuance because it's a complicated arc. It's not something that you say it's going to be good. It's a whole full process, right? Hope is a full process.
Optimism is like blind faith that everything is going to get better.
Yeah.
Hope is actually really fucking hard.
Yeah.
And it's like the fuel that each of us like sort of put into contributing towards changing things. Two, how are you feeling about the future?
Fuck.
Same.
I believe in doing the good thing and leaning into the right thing, whether you win or lose. I think you should do the right thing or what you believe is right so you can sleep at night. But hope, it's 2026. It's been a hard year for a lot of us, man. So like, you know, the house is on fire right now. I'm trying to put out the fire. It's hard to look at the future. But to be able to get out the house or put out the fire, you need to know that there's a future. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
I think like hope can feel Pollyannish right now. It can feel like so far away. It can feel foolish. But I also think about like there's a lot of sort of science to hope at the end of the day, honestly. And like it reminds me a lot of there's work done by a professor at Stanford. His name is Jamil Zaki. He's the head of their social neuroscience lab there, and he's dedicated his entire career to the like behavioral science of hope. And he basically, from his work, has boiled down the components of hope into three things: the ability to see a better future, our willingness to contribute to that better future, and then our ability to see a path towards the better future. And so his hypothesis is that we've lost the last one. We've lost our ability to see the path toward it. The house is on fire. We can't even fucking see out the windows, right? Like we cannot, we want to contribute to it. We want to put out the fire. We believe in that better world, but we don't see a pathway to it. And he, in his research has identified that there are a few ways for us to like cultivate it, like in our daily lives. And he's found that it kind of comes down to two things. It comes down to identifying shared values. I feel like you and I have done that, like in our friendship, have been like, yeah, we come from really different places, but like we have rock solid shared values. And then number two, relatedly, you need to build trusting relationships. And then if you do that like those two things, identifying shared values and building trusting relationships that are built on those shared values, you start to retrain your brain to be able to sort of see that path, to see that path towards the better future. And I think in these times where things can feel so overwhelming and so violent and sort of, we can't see out the windows and the house is on fire, that, we may not think about the future, but we can focus on trying to keep that flame of hope, right? Because ultimately hope isn't the end, but it is the means to the end, right? And so, the way that we get through this is through our relationships, is through our trust that we build with each other, through showing up for each other. You're seeing that across the country right now. And ultimately the strength of our community and like finding solidarity and hope in that community, I think is like step one.
And if that's,
then we'll put the fire out, right?
And if that's the case, we become the vast majority, if not the global majority.
Correct. Because I will go one step further, like, this sort of identification of shared values, right? Like if we look at American history, there are more people who believe in that sort of more just vision of the world right now than at any other point in the history of the United States. That is objectively true. But what we don't have is that like trust that everyone else around us will show up when we need them to. And I think that's where, you see little pockets of hope of like people showing up for their neighbors, maybe not, in the form of protest, but like being able to support them through mutual aid, through protecting them. And I think ultimately that trust in that community, it will be the foundations upon which we can then rebuild the house.
Or burn it down. And then rebuild.
And then rebuild it. Right. Yes, correct.
I appreciate the nuance because it's a complicated arc, right? It's not something that you say it's going to be good. It's a whole full process, right? Hope is a full process.
And there's a difference between optimism and hope.
Yeah.
Optimism is like sort of blind faith that everything is going to get better.
Yeah.
Hope is actually really fucking hard.
Yeah.
And it's like the fuel that each of us like sort of put into contributing towards changing things. Yeah.
Can I extract from that it's not just about building and creating things together, but it's also about showing up and participating, right?
Exactly.
You have to believe, if you want change in a system, you have to participate. You have to show up. You have to be allied, or you have to be allies, right?
Yeah. And that's
then build community at the same time.
Exactly.
It's not one or the other.
Exactly. And that's not to say like everything needs to be incremental. It's not that we need to move slowly or like any of the things that like tamp down people's anger or enthusiasm for change. Is to say like we got to do both. We both got to like operate within the system and then completely change it.
Yeah.
And like that only happens when we have those solid relationships where we can have those hard conversations.
Over a meal.
Over a meal.
Over a family
meal. Full circle. Family meal.
Family meal.
I think food can sort of give us a way or give us space to like envision what the future looks like in really powerful ways and sort of unexpected ways. Like take, for example, like climate change, really big, complex problem that it feels like we have like no agency to actually contribute to a solution. And there's a lot of really interesting research about the role our food and like how we interact with food can contribute to solving the problem. So for example, the role that changing our agricultural practices can actually suck carbon out of the air and store it within our soil. And it's called regenerative agriculture. It has a lot of roots in indigenous growing practices, similar to like when we hear about like the Amazon being able to suck, carbon out of the air because of the number of trees. It's the same thing, except instead of trees, it's, where we grow our food. And I think it's a really powerful example because it is something that it can contribute to. At the end of the day,
every single person
can contribute to that, like culturally speaking, to sort of shift us from this like extractive view of the world to a way that sort of regenerates. And it's also worth noting that like this cultural shift like has a lot of roots in indigenous culture. Like, it's called regenerative agriculture in the field, but it's really based on indigenous growing practices that sort of create this cycle of health both for us and for the planet.
It's interesting that the solution that you're proposing is actually something that's really old.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Right.
Yes.
And it's the perception and understanding that seeds are currency, right? And self-sustenance and self-nourishing. Like that's an old practice. That's something that's of knowledge, not from only in recent times where academia is acknowledging it, but these are oral traditions.
Yep.
Right. Across a lot of different cultures, if not most, if not all, right?
Yep. Yeah, and it really highlights sort of how extractive a lot of sort of our capitalist economy has become. A lot of our inability to sort of combat climate change actually comes down to a relentless focus on extracting value. And if we can sort of commit to retraining those muscles to create a virtuous cycle that, to your point, is a very old concept, and it's been followed by many cultures and civilizations for thousands of years. Like that is fundamentally an empowering story, right? That like climate change is a big problem that is hard to solve, and we're not going to solve it by recycling our cans, but we can, like, there are ways for us to contribute.
So you're saying me paying 10 cents for paper grocery bags at the grocery store really doesn't do shit, but empowers the grocery store because they actually get the money back that they spent on me, so I could pack up my groceries so I could take home, which they were supposed to provide me a service for that anyways.
I feel like you're like winding up to take a swing at what it shouldn't look like. I feel like my argument is for, like a bold cultural vision of what it should look like. I feel there are plenty of examples of what it should not look like.
So leaning towards the other way. So I think what you're suggesting in regards to leaning into seeds that's current seed, doing something old, for a solution of the future, moving backwards, that moves away from quantifying success, that moves away from saying food's going to bring us $10 billion or food's going to increase tourism in our city or food's going to
increase the S&P 500 by
increase,
5%.
Yeah, by 5%,
whatever,
right? Like whatever bullshit statistic that doesn't have real world effect to your everyday person. Your solution is providing the fact that your family can immediately benefit the fruits of these seeds that you plant. That's the short-term goal, right? The long-term goal is not just a tradition and knowledge, but the long-term goal is that it will affect climate change.
And to put a finer point on it, like there's a lot of research around how regenerative agriculture actually concentrates the nutrients in the crops that it produces better than the way that we produce crops now. So like our carrots, our produce, like will be more nutritious for us. If we were to like take a less extractive view of how to plant these.
What's really interesting for us is that it's normalized that we take supplements and vitamins for what we're not getting in our food anymore, right? And I think that's it. We need to do some research. I'm not a scientist, but I mean, I think there's a suggestion there where our food is not as nutrient dense as it used to be.
No, it's not. It's not. And it's like, it's actually quite shocking the like cutting edge nature of some of the research around like how deficient like our nutrients are in a lot of our produce. And like, yeah, of course, if we're like sucking the nutrients out of the soil for 150 years, they're not going to be like as nutritious for us, right?
For larger carrots, faster tomatoes.
Exactly.
Off-season tomatoes.
It's about convenience and speed and being able to get everything we want anytime we want.
Yeah.
And that culture does not lend itself to healthy living, honestly.
So you're telling me we shouldn't move to a society where there's a protein shake and we just drink it 3 times a day and don't have any substance of food or no point of growing food?
Look, there are lots of ways that our current world is already dystopic. We don't need to add another like way that we are in a dystopia. I want food to actually taste like things. So yes, no protein shakes for me, but.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like the future doesn't have to look stale,
right?
It doesn't have to allude to any scientific novels that we still have control, right? And it's our choice to participate in it or not.
Yeah. And I think that's where like food can create the space for imagining something that is less sterile, right? And I think that's where we like. Particularly right now, like we're preventing the bad things from happening, right? Like we're trying our hardest to prevent the bad things from happening, but like there are ways for us to create something that actually is inspiring.
But these solutions are amazing, but they need resources.
Correct.
Right. I think if we want to talk about regenerative farming, there's been numerous amounts of a movement of urban farms popping up all over inner city areas all across the United States, and not just limited to our country, in other countries as well too, where in densely population city blocks where there isn't a place to actually grow things, they create urban gardens.
Yep.
Right, on rooftops, on side streets, make parks where there weren't parks before. It used to be a parking lot. But I just want to be honest, like that's a great solution, but how do we allocate those resources if it's not going to come from the government? Yep. Like the regenerative space is fucking messy now.
Yeah.
Right. We don't have
National Institute of Health.
We don't. I mean, they got defunded, right? It's not that they don't exist. They just got.
Also, the USDA cut billions of dollars in support for agriculture.
Right. So like that alone for regenerative agriculture is like it's fucking messy right now. We talk about. Robert Kennedy Jr. Right? That's fucking messy right now. That's like, but that's like what lies ahead. It's hard to talk about the future if you're not addressed. I think that's my stance. It's hard to talk about the future if you're not just talking about the potholes.
Right.
You want us to be hopeful when all this shit's happening, right? You want me to be hopeful when DHS is pulling my neighbor out into the streets and locking him up, and we don't know where he is. Like, this is hard territory.
Yeah, this is hard territory.
You have 5 kids.
Yeah.
Mom and dad both working night and day. There's a huge deficits from what they're being compensated and what bills are amounted to. I think that's what I'm trying. I'm trying to be cognizant of that.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm trying to run for Senate or anything, but I think it's a lot to unpack.
And like, I think that how do we have an honest conversation about the future if we don't get into that stuff? I felt a little bit of that tension, like while we were talking about that, because I mean, essentially, climate change is an example. It helps us to like be imaginative or creative, but it's not necessarily like, okay, now jump into the messiness of it.
I think there's this pulse check for me that maybe I'm experiencing is that if your house is on fire, you don't talk about how amazing it is going to be tomorrow when you rebuild the house. And I feel that people on social media are feeling like the house is on fire right now.
Yeah.
And I think the glimmer of hope is if we are intended to giving people hope, we address the now. And if we do talk about the future, it's like, we'll get there.
It's a good question because there's no silver bullet. I think that's where...
I think you did give us a silver bullet, though. Movements. Micro movements. Start them small. Start them in proximity of your friends and your family. With the understanding of if you target 10, there's going to be a 10x factor of who you inspire. And that becomes a macro movement, right? So I think more than ever, right? Start the movement.